Here we are in Korea, January 1951. The new year started off looking a little promising for the UN, but as you can see over here, it did not turn out pleasantly. First of all, they escalated their commitment in terms of air rules of engagement. They set it up so they could bomb right up against the Chinese border, basically, thereby trying to reduce the North Korean, the Chinese army, as it is, supply ability. They did manage. The North Koreans did manage to get a single point of supply, though, which is all they needed because they had this nice central location to launch their attacks from. So what happened? Well, at first, like I said, it looked kind of nice because the UN went to an offensive commitment of supply, which meant 3 supply points. That's the most you can spend out of this depot. They're planning on ripping that depot up, so they wanted to use the points that it had. The offensive commitment allowed them to kind of play this wave back and forth game over the terrain right here along the river line. And as long as they still had units, they could push back pretty well. But once all their units had attacked, the sheer numbers that the Chinese are able to deploy eventually overwhelmed them and got them into this ugly little pocket. On the other hand, the Chinese made some kind of low odds attacks against those Marines, and again, sheer numbers, quantity of attacks, eventually they got lucky enough that they knocked a unit off, so they just kept coming and kept coming. Again, at low odds each time, but they're gone now. So the road is not completely clear. There's one regiment in the way, and another one down in Busan. Another regiment was moving up towards the Seoul area. The paratroopers weren't able to drop anywhere, so they came in as reinforcements at Incheon and were thrown into the meat grinder up here. Right now, I don't see a way that the UN can win, actually. They probably should have just fallen back and tried to hold their position. The question is, can they avoid losing, or can they avoid losing bad at this point? We'll see. February 51. The situation's really looking grim for the UN. Not a lot changed. I mean, we got this swamping around Seoul. Basically, the line was just unable to hold. Victory points haven't been affected at all by this, but Seoul is going to fall, so that will in and of itself be an issue. We also have the situation along the coast here. Basically, the Reds got absolutely no supplies at all, but the UN got very little. They were operating on a restricted supply, or a limited supply, which means that they weren't really able to push a strong counterattack against the weak communist units, and just sheer numbers was enough to allow sort of wave tactics. We don't need no stinking bullets. So here we see what happens when there's nothing in the way of the Chinese army. They've got one U.S. unit surrounded, pocketed down here. The rest are down in Busan. I guess the lesson to be learned is don't cross that border just dipping your toe in. If you're going to cross the 38th parallel, do it in force, do it hard, do it fast, and get as many victory points as you can. Definitely, whatever little advantage might have been gained, I believe we grabbed this town for one turn and kind of threatened Wasan but didn't take it, was not worth it. You got to go across with everything that the UN has to make it at all worthwhile, because you have to, A, you're going to be giving up a lot of ground on the Chinese offensive, and B, you have to get enough points to make it worth it. And here, clearly, it was not worth crossing. We'll see. End of February 51, very briefly. The UN once again got the supply advantage and used it to some good effect, taking Tagu back and extending here, but maybe those extensions are a little unwise. They certainly are putting some units at risk. Of course, they got some more units down in Busan area. But it's not really helping. I mean, they're not going to lose militarily. They're not going to lose Busan. They're probably not going to lose Busan and all the, or they're not probably not going to lose all the other cities. But they're losing victory points because the global tension's at 2, which is -10 per turn, and they only produced, I believe, 8 victory points for the cities they held. And they may not be able to hold all of those, so it's kind of questionable. But we see garrisoning at Incheon and over, well, no, not at Wasan. There's just so many places where the Americans could land their new Marines that are coming in here, that you can't defend them all. So the decision is Incheon is probably the most important because it's the opening to Seoul. There's a lot of points right there. I think 5. You don't want that to fall. So that's about the limit of where we are right now. We'll see, but it's just a question of how badly the UN's going to do at this point. They're under 90 victory points. They may not do much better than that. And that would put it as a decisive victory for the Reds.